The Defense Department Inspector General has issued a little old report that I think shines a very glaring spotlight on this drunk son of a bitch, Pete Hegseth. And listen, you know, I know he said he was going to stop drinking once he became attorney or defense Secretary of Defense. That's bullshit. How many alcoholics have you known? I've known a couple. And a couple of them really caused me an awful lot of pain and suffering and grief and sadness, watching the deterioration of someone that I really cared about. But I know this from spending time in Al-Anon, from trying to figure out how in the fuck to survive with an alcoholic partner, an addicted partner. What I've learned is that, first of all, I learned that Alcoholics Anonymous, which seems to be the catch-all safety net for alcoholics, has a success rate of about 6%, which means it has a failure rate of about 94%, which is not a condemnation of the addict. It's just a statement of medical fact. I don't think anybody wants to blame an addict of any sort, alcohol, drugs, whatever, for suffering a moral failure. I think most of us have come to accept the idea that addiction is a disease, and we don't criticize people for developing cancer. We don't criticize people for developing, hepatitis B. So why should we criticize people who develop an addiction? Okay. I have a hard time with that because it took me a long time to come to that conclusion, if I've come to it to begin with, which is that addiction is a disease. Don't condemn the victim of the disease. Although, think about alcoholism. It is so debilitating. It is so violent. It is so awful that it doesn't just affect the person that is caught in that net. It affects every person they know, family, friends, everybody has to deal with it. That's the reason for Al-Anon, how to deal with it. Until your group says, look, you're going to have to get away from it. But I digress. The reason I bring that up is because Pete Hegseth, one of the things I learned, is an alcoholic, remains an alcoholic. I don't like the term dry drunk. It's a little bit demeaning. It's kind of insulting, a dry drunk. But in Hegseth's case, I'm more than willing to use that. He is a dry drunk. If you watch him, I don't know if he's still drinking, but I can recognize the behavior of the so-called dry drunk syndrome, and Hegseth has it 100%. His flailing of his arms, the way he twitches and moves and thrusts his hands in his face and his chin out when he's talking, as if he is under assault by people who don't want to believe him. So dry drunk, I have no problem referring to Hegseth as that. And he may still be drinking. But the Defense Department Inspector General concluded in a report filed 2 days ago that when the that's Trump, when the drunk Hegseth shared on a group signal chat about a pending military operation in Yemen that was considered classified, that he violated military regulations. He broke the law. And this report, according to NBC, the report outlines the findings of this 8-month investigation into the drunk's use of Signal, that communications app. It's an encrypted but unclassified messaging app. And the drunk and other people who work for the toilet rat, because they don't give a shit about national security, they only care about their grift, whatever little fucking operation that they are running as they sit in positions of power in the Trump administration. But the app is used to share, he used it, Hegseth, the drunk, to share details of the planned U.S. strikes back in March before they even had begun. Remember that? It's so hard to keep track of this shit because it's something new every day, some further violation of the law or the Universal Code of Military Justice or international law, or in Hegseth's case, more recently, a fucking war crime. Hegseth is a goddamn killer. He is a murderer. And if he's ever let loose, if he's ever told, go ahead, dude, do it, whatever you want, the population of this country is in severe jeopardy. But the report found that the information the drunk shared had been marked secret and could have imperiled American troops had it been intercepted by a foreign adversary. Let me say this about that, as Nixon used to say. I'm sure it was intercepted. But why bother with an attack in Yemen, killing people in the country of Yemen? Who the fuck cares about people from Yemen, right? You think Russia cares? You think China cares? You think Iran cares? Well, I guess Iran did. At least the Houthis, right? Anyway, two people who have read the report have spilled their guts to NBC News. And they went on to say that the evaluation by the Inspector General at the Defense Department also concluded that the drunk violated military regulations by using his personal phone for official business. In other words, what they're saying, as if we needed to know this fucking piece of human waste has been, Hegseth has been in office since shortly after the filthy toilet rat took the presidency. We don't need to be told that not only is he incompetent and a drunk and a fucking freak, but he also is putting the lives of the U.S. military in constant danger and jeopardy. Do you think this son of a bitch is going to take any responsibility when there is an attack on American troops like there was in D.C. the other day? Do you think Hegseth is going to say shit even though he has a mouthful of it? No. Of course not. And by the way, Hegseth declined to be interviewed by these investigators who are from his own department. He wouldn't even talk to people within the Defense Department. But he did give them a little note, a little written statement. And in that statement, he said he'd shared no classified information on the group chat. Blah, 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 blah. He said in the statement to investigators that he had provided only information that he thought would not imperil either the mission or the troops conducting it. And if you want to believe that, you're willing to believe any kind of bullshit that comes out of this bastard's mouth. He is a liar. He's just like everybody who works for the toilet rat. A fucking liar, a grifter, and somebody who does not care one iota about this country, the Constitution, or the people like you and me who live here. They don't give a shit. So the investigators for the Inspector General's office noted that they didn't agree with what Hegseth presented as his defense. They just didn't agree with it. And the report also said, and again, this is from NBC, the report also said that Hegseth, as the Secretary of Defense, is the, quote, original classification authority, end quote. And as in fact does have the authority to declassify intelligence based on his judgment. A fucking dry drunk can make decisions about U.S. national security that can and does imperil not just our troops, but us. All of this is in the hands of this insane son of a bitch, Hegseth. Now, the Inspector General did not mention, even though Hegseth has the authority, didn't mention whether the drunk took the proper steps to declassify the information. Well, how could he? There wasn't enough time to do it. And in a post on X Wednesday night, last night, this slimy drunk bastard wrote, quote, no classified information, total exoneration, case closed, end quote. Total exoneration, case closed. Do you have relatives in the U.S. military right now? I don't. But if you do you understand that the person who has ultimate authority regarding the military, not ultimate, but just one step below this piece of human shit that is Donald Trump, but that Hegseth has authority to order your family member, your relative, your friend into a situation where he or she, first of all, doesn't belong, secondly, may have been instructed to commit a war crime, third, may wind up dead, him or herself. That's who controls the U.S. military right now. No classified information, total exoneration, case closed, according to Hegseth. And then Trump's spokesbitch, who is the press secretary, this little Christian cockroach, Carolyn Leavitt, said in a statement earlier in the day, yesterday, that the review by the Inspector General, now get this, quote, the review affirms that the administration has said from the beginning no classified information was leaked and operational security was not compromised. President Trump stands by Secretary Hegseth. End quote. Trump's spokesbitch, who wears the instrument of torture proudly around her white little neck. Well, it's not little, you know what I'm saying. And Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, Democrat, combat veteran, astronaut, he sits on the Armed Services Committee, which ostensibly oversees the Pentagon. It used to. It doesn't anymore. But he spoke to reporters after he read the report. Senator Kelly did. And he said this, quote, it said he was in violation of some Department of Defense regulations. So whether that's breaking the law, you got to figure that out. End quote. Kelly added this, quote, he needs to make sure he doesn't do this again because the next time something really, really bad could happen, end quote. Which raises the question, doesn't it? If something really, really bad could happen next time, shouldn't this drunk son of a bitch be removed from office to prevent just that? Well, in a rational world, in an administration that the American people support, which is not this one, he never would have been confirmed by the Senate to begin with. And he would keep in mind he was confirmed by one vote to break the tie, and that vote was by this fucking pet ape of Donald Trump's, this guy who is just salivating to become president when the toilet rat keels over, and that, of course, is J.D. Hillbilly Vance. The Inspector General's report was given to the Senate and House Armed Services and Intelligence Committees yesterday. And those lawmakers were reviewing it yesterday, according to congressional aides. And a redacted version has not been released publicly. Redacted, right, redacted. In other words, the information necessary to let the American people know what a useless, rotten, fucking disaster danger to the United States this Hegseth drunk is, that information is going to be redacted. We are not to know it. I wonder why. I mean, we provide the funding necessary, most of it anyway. A lot of it, I know, comes from the sale of U.S. bonds to our great friend and ally, China. But holy shit, we're not going to be allowed to see what all was involved. And by the way, that group chat on Signal, which included other top members of the Toilet Rats National Security Team, so-called, they're about as secure as anything could not be. But it became public after the editor, one of the editors at the Atlantic magazine, was added to the list of people to listen in. And the Inspector General's report noted that the drunk provided investigators with only a small number of his signal messages. So the Inspector General relied on the screenshots that were published by the Atlantic. Hegseth, this son of a bitch, knows that he is breaking the law. He knows this. He knows that he is in violation of Department of Defense rules and regulations. He knows this. So what does he do? He refuses to provide the information necessary for the Inspector General's investigation. And nobody in a position of power says anything about that. Oh, well, that's just standard operating procedure for people who work for the toilet rat. Deny, obfuscate, hide, don't answer, plead the fifth. This is who's running the country now. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.